The wedding music stopped the moment the dress tore. A sharp gasp cut through the air as the bride staggered backward, her hands shaking as she clutched her pregnant belly. White lace fell apart beneath her fingers, ruined, exposed, just like her heart. Tears spilled freely as pain and fear overtook her, her body trembling under the weight of the moment. The man standing before her was breathing hard, his eyes wild with jealousy and unresolved rage. His hands were still raised, as if he couldn't believe what he had just done. Around them, guests stood frozen. Some looked away. Others stared in horror, unsure whether to intervene. Then, from the back of the crowd, a man stepped forward. He didn't shout, he didn't rush, but the calm authority in his silence made everyone turn. And that was when the truth began to surface. Before we begin this powerful story, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? And what time is it there? Drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to see how far this story is traveling. And if you believe stories of justice, love, and second chances deserve to be told, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what happens next. Before the torn dress, before the public humiliation. There was once a woman who believed love was enough. Her name was Amina. She was born and raised on the edge of a crowded African city where the roads were dusty. The nights were loud, and dreams were often postponed rather than pursued. Amina wasn't extraordinary by society's standards, but there was something quietly powerful about her. She had gentle eyes, a soft voice, and a patience that seemed endless. People often mistook her calmness for weakness. They were wrong. Amina met Kola in her early 20s when life still felt negotiable. Kola was confident, loud, and charming in a rough-edged way. He worked small jobs, construction here, deliveries there, and spoke often about big plans. He talked about owning land one day, starting a business, becoming someone people respect. Amina listened. She always listened. They married quickly, not because they were reckless, but because they were hopeful. The wedding was small plastic chairs, borrowed speakers, food cooked by relatives, but Amina glowed that day. She believed she was stepping into a future where struggle would be shared and love would soften the hard days. The first year was not easy, but it was survivable. They lived in a one-room apartment with peeling paint and unreliable electricity. Some nights, they ate rice without meat. Other nights, they laughed over nothing at all. When Kola came home exhausted, Amina rubbed his shoulders. When Amina was tired, she kept it to herself. She believed marriage meant endurance. But slowly, almost invisibly, things began to change. Kola's jobs became shorter. His temper became longer. When money was scarce, his words grew sharp. He snapped at small things. A misplaced cup, a late meal, a question asked at the wrong time. Amina learned the art of silence. "You think this life is easy for me," Kola would shout, pacing the room. "I'm the one carrying everything." Amina would lower her eyes and answer softly, "I know. I'm here." But being there was never enough. Kola began to measure his worth by what he didn't have, and he needed someone to blame. That someone, slowly, became his wife. When neighbors advanced, when friends mocked his lack of progress, when relatives asked uncomfortable questions, Kola returned home heavier with frustration. And frustration demanded release. "You don't motivate me," he once told Amina coldly. "You just sit there waiting for miracles." That night, Amina cried quietly into her pillow so he wouldn't hear. Still she stayed, because she loved him. Because she believed storms passed. because she thought patience could heal pride. Then she discovered she was pregnant. At first, she didn't tell him. She waited for the right moment, one of those rare evenings when Kola was calm, when the room felt almost warm again. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled with both fear and joy. "I'm pregnant," she said. For a few seconds, Kola said nothing. Then he laughed short, humorless. "Pregnant," he repeated. "Is this a joke?" Amina smiled nervously. "No, I went to the clinic." His expression darkened. "Do you know how much responsibility that is?" he snapped. "Do you think I asked for this now?" Her smile faded. From that day, the house changed. Kola stopped touching her, stopped asking how she felt. When she complained of nausea or dizziness, he rolled his eyes. "You women like drama," he said once. "My mother carried 5 children without complaining." Amina swallowed her pain. As her belly grew, so did Kola's suspicion. He began asking questions, too many questions. "Are you sure this child is mine? You go out a lot. People talk." Each accusation struck her like a slap. One night, during a heated argument, Kola said the words that broke something inside her forever. "If this baby ruins my life," he said, pointing at her stomach, "don't expect me to carry your shame." Amina felt the world tilt. Still she stayed, until the night everything collapsed. It was raining hard, relentless rain that turned the streets into rivers. Kola came home late, smelling of alcohol and anger. He accused her of disrespect, of weakness, of dragging him down. The argument exploded. "You are useless," he shouted. "You think I'll raise another man's child?" Amina tried to explain. She tried to plead, but Kola had already decided. "Get out," he said suddenly. "What? Get out of my house." Amina stared at him, shocked. "Kola, it's raining. I'm pregnant." He opened the door. "Go," he said coldly. "Before I do something worse." She packed nothing. There was nothing to pack. That night, Amina stepped into the rain with a small bag and a body heavy with life. The door slammed behind her, sealing off not just a house, but a marriage she had fought to save alone. She stood there for a moment, unsure where to go. Then she walked. Each step felt unreal. Her dress clung to her skin. Her heart pounded with fear. She whispered to her unborn child, tears mixing with rain. "I'm here," she said softly. "I won't leave you." As the city swallowed her figure, Kola locked the door behind her and turned off the light, convinced he had erased a problem. He didn't know he had just set something far greater in motion. The night Amina was thrown out did not end when the rain stopped. It followed her. Long after the clouds cleared, the humiliation clung to her skin like a second layer. Heavy cold, impossible to shake off. She spent that first night sitting under the narrow shelter of a closed roadside shop, knees pulled to her chest, arms wrapped around her belly, as if she could shield the child from the cruelty of the world. She did not sleep. Every sound made her flinch. Every passing car sent a rush of fear through her veins. By morning, her body ached, but her mind was worse crowded with questions that had no answers. Where would she go? Who would help her? How did love turn into this? At dawn, she stood and began walking again. Amina went first to Kola's older sister, Sadeh, a woman who had once praised her patience and called her a good wife. Amina stood at the gate for several minutes, rehearsing her words, steadying her breath. When Sadeh finally opened the door, her eyes flicked immediately to Amina's swollen belly. "What do you want?" she asked flatly. Amina's voice trembled. "Kola sent me away. I have nowhere to stay. Please." Just until Sade cut her off with a raised hand. My brother told me everything she said. You want to bring trouble into our family. Amina froze. Everything? What do you mean? Sade crossed her arms. You know what I mean. Pregnancy doesn't just happen. If you couldn't respect your marriage, don't expect us to clean your mess. The words hit harder than any slap. I never cheated, Amina whispered. This child is Kola's. Sadi's face remained unmoved. That's what all women say. The gate closed slowly, deliberately, leaving Amina standing in the street, her reflection faintly visible in the metal. She barely recognized herself. Eyes hollow, shoulders slumped, dignity cracking under the weight of rejection. She went to an aunt next, then a former neighbor. Each door brought a new version of the same response: suspicion, judgment, discomfort. Some avoided eye contact, others pretended they weren't home. By midday, the whispers had already begun. Did you hear she's pregnant? Kola chased her out. I heard the baby isn't even his. In African communities, shame travels faster than truth. Amina felt it everywhere. In the way market women stopped smiling when she approached, in the way conversations paused when she passed by. Her name had become a cautionary tale, her body evidence of supposed wrongdoing. And Kola let it happen. He did more than let it happen. He fed it. When people asked him what went wrong, he shrugged with wounded pride. I tried, he would say. But some women don't respect marriage. He told them he had been deceived, that he had been patient, that he refused to raise a child that might not be his. Each lie made him feel more justified. Meanwhile, Amina struggled to survive. She found temporary shelter with a distant church acquaintance who allowed her to sleep on a thin mat near the kitchen floor. In exchange, Amina cleaned, cooked, fetched water, anything she could do without complaint. Her body was growing heavier, slower. Her feet swelled, her back burned with pain. Some nights, she pressed her palms against her belly and whispered apologies to the life inside her. I'm trying, she said. Please be patient with me. The baby responded with gentle kicks, small reminders that she was not alone. But even that comfort was threatened. One afternoon, as Amina returned from buying cheap vegetables, she found the woman she stayed with standing rigidly in the doorway. You didn't tell me the full story, the woman said. Amina's stomach tightened. What story? Kola came here today, she replied. He said you were causing trouble, that you might bring problems to my house. Amina's knees weakened. I didn't do anything, she said. I swear. The woman sighed. I believe you want peace, but I have children. I can't risk gossip. By nightfall, Amina was back on the street. Something inside her broke, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. For the first time since her marriage began, she allowed herself to think the unthinkable. Kola never loved me. She remembered every time she had stayed quiet to keep the peace, every insult she had swallowed, every dream she had postponed so he could feel like a man. And now when she needed him most, he had erased her. That realization hurt more than hunger, more than loneliness. It hardened her. The next morning, Amina walked to a public clinic. She had not been there since the early weeks of her pregnancy. Money had always been the barrier. The waiting room was crowded, noisy, and hot. When her turn finally came, the nurse looked at her file, then at her worn clothes. Where is the father? The nurse asked. Amina hesitated. He isn't involved. The nurse clicked her tongue. You women should think before opening your legs. Amina stared at the floor. Even in pain, she refused to cry. The examination revealed what Amina already felt. She was exhausted, undernourished, at risk. The nurse warned her to rest, to eat better, to reduce stress. Amina almost laughed. Rest where? Eat with what? As she left the clinic, she saw Kola's friend Bayo standing across the road. Their eyes met. Bayo looked away. That small gesture told her everything. Kola had spoken. People had chosen sides. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the city in orange shadows, Amina sat alone on a low concrete step and made a quiet decision. If the world had already judged her, she would stop begging for mercy. She would survive, not to prove anyone wrong, but to protect her child. I won't disappear, she whispered to her belly, no matter how much they want me to. Somewhere across the city, Kola slept soundly in the bed Amina had once made for him. He believed the chapter was closed. That shame had solved his problem. He had no idea that the woman he discarded was being reshaped by suffering into someone unbreakable. And he had no idea that the story he tried to bury was only beginning. Hunger teaches lessons that comfort never could. For Amina, it taught her how invisible a person could become. Days after being pushed back onto the streets, she learned how to read the city in a new way, not as a place of opportunity, but as a maze of survival. She knew which streets were safer after sunset, which corners had security lights, which shop owners would shout at her, and which ones would simply pretend she didn't exist. She learned to sit still. A pregnant woman draws attention, but not the kind that helps. Some people stared with pity, others with judgment, a few with curiosity, as if her swollen belly were a public announcement of failure. She avoided mirrors. She avoided crowds. She avoided hope. At night, she slept wherever exhaustion allowed her to collapse, sometimes behind a closed kiosk, sometimes near a bus terminal where the noise never stopped. She folded her thin shawl beneath her head and wrapped her arms around her stomach, instinctively protecting the life inside her. The nights were the hardest. Cold crept into her bones. Hunger twisted her insides. And fear of sickness, of labor beginning too early, of dying quietly where no one would notice, sat heavy on her chest. When the baby kicked, it startled her at first. Then it comforted her. "You're still there," she whispered. "So am I." During the day, Amina searched for work. She offered to wash clothes, to sweep floors, to carry water. Many shop owners waved her away as soon as they noticed her pregnancy. "Come back after you give birth," they said. "Pregnant women are slow. What if something happens to you here?" Some were kinder, but just as firm. "I'm sorry," one woman said gently. "I can't take that risk." Each rejection chipped away at Amina's strength. One afternoon, her legs finally gave out. She had not eaten properly in 2 days. The heat was unforgiving. Her vision blurred as she tried to cross the road. The last thing she remembered was the sound of a car horn and the world tilting sideways. When she woke up, the ceiling above her was white. The smell of disinfectant filled her nose. She was in a hospital. Panic surged through her as she tried to sit up. A sharp pain shot through her abdomen, forcing her back down. A nurse rushed over her, expression stern but alert. "Don't move," the nurse said. "You fainted." "My baby," Amina gasped. "Is my baby okay?" The nurse studied her face for a moment before nodding. "The baby is alive, but you're weak. Very weak." Amina turned her head and stared at the wall, tears sliding silently into her hair. Alive was all she had prayed for. Later that day, a man stood quietly at the foot of her bed. He was tall, well-dressed, and out of place among the chaos of the public ward. His suit was simple, but clearly expensive. His posture relaxed, yet commanding. He did not look at Amina with pity or judgment, only concern. "I'm Daniel," he said calmly. "I brought you in." Amina struggled to push herself upright. "Thank you," she whispered. I'll leave as soon as I can. Daniel raised a hand gently. There's no rush. She studied him cautiously. Men she had learned often came with conditions, with expectations. I don't have money, she added quickly. If that's... Daniel shook his head. I didn't help you for money. The silence that followed was unfamiliar. Safe. Over the next few hours, Daniel returned twice, once with bottled water, once with food. He didn't hover, didn't interrogate. He spoke only when spoken to. Finally, Amina asked the question that burned inside her. Why, she said. Why help me? Daniel paused. Because you collapsed, he replied simply. And because you didn't ask for anything. That answer stayed with her. The doctors insisted she remain under observation. They warned her about anemia, stress, dehydration. One mentioned that losing the baby was a real risk if her condition didn't improve. When Daniel returned the next morning, Amina spoke before fear could stop her. I need to work, she said urgently. If I don't, I'll end up back outside. Daniel listened carefully. I can arrange a place for you to stay temporarily, he said. Somewhere safe. Her pride flared instinctively. I don't want charity. Daniel met her gaze. Then don't treat it like charity. Treat it like time. Time. The word felt foreign, luxurious. After a long pause, Amina nodded. The place Daniel arranged was small, but clean. A modest room behind a women's cooperative that worked with displaced mothers. There were rules, responsibilities, no handouts. Amina cleaned floors, sorted donated clothes, cooked communal meals. Her body slowly regained strength, and for the first time in months, she slept without fear. Daniel visited occasionally, not every day, not intrusively. When he did, he asked about her health, the baby, the work. He never mentioned her past, unless she did. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky gold, Amina finally spoke. My husband sent me away, she said quietly. He said the baby might not be his. Daniel said nothing. He told everyone lies, she continued, and they believed him. Daniel nodded slowly. People often believe what protects their comfort. She looked at him then. Why don't you? He smiled faintly. Because I've learned that strength doesn't always shout. Weeks passed. Amina's belly grew rounder, her steps steadier. She began helping other women at the Cooperative Women with stories different from hers, yet painfully similar. She started to feel useful again. One afternoon, Daniel asked her a question that made her heart stop. Would you consider starting over? He asked gently. Not just surviving, but living. Amina's throat tightened. I don't know how, she admitted. Daniel's voice was calm. You already are. Somewhere far away in the house he once shared with her, Kola laughed with friends and spoke of freedom. He believed Amina had disappeared into nothing. He never imagined she was slowly rebuilding herself piece by fragile piece. And he certainly never imagined who was standing beside her. Amina did not trust kindness anymore. Not fully. Life had taught her that help usually arrived with hidden strings. Expectations spoken softly. Debts never clearly defined. Obligations that grew heavier with time. So, when Daniel continued to show up, without demanding explanations, gratitude, or submission, she didn't know how to receive it. It made her uneasy. Still, she could not deny the difference his presence made. Her body was healing, slowly, steadily. The dizziness faded. Her appetite returned. At night, she slept longer, deeper, without waking in terror at every unfamiliar sound. The baby inside her seemed calmer too, its movements gentle and rhythmic, like quiet reassurances. "You're safe," she would whisper to her belly before sleeping. At least for now. The women's cooperative became her anchor. Each morning, she woke early, swept the compound, sorted donated clothes by size and condition. Pregnant women worked slower. There, no one rushed her, no one scolded her. For the first time since her marriage began, Amina was allowed to be human. Daniel never treated her like a project. He did not offer grand speeches or dramatic gestures. When he visited, he sat on a wooden bench under the neem tree and listened. Sometimes they spoke about small things: the weather, the rising cost of food, the stubbornness of traffic. Other times, they sat in silence. That silence was different. It wasn't empty. It wasn't threatening. It didn't demand anything. One afternoon, as Amina folded clothes beside another woman named Lillian, she noticed Daniel standing near the gate, speaking quietly into his phone. His posture was relaxed, but his voice carried authority. "Yes," he said. "Delay it until next quarter." "No, I'm not available today." Lillian leaned toward Amina, lowering her voice. "Who is that man really?" Amina shrugged. "Someone who helped me." Lillian raised an eyebrow. "He doesn't look like someone who just helps." The comment unsettled Amina more than she expected. That evening, she asked Daniel directly. "You speak like a man, used to being obeyed," she said carefully. Daniel smiled faintly. Old habits. From what she pressed. He looked at her for a moment, then answered honestly but incompletely. "From work," he said. "I manage things." Amina nodded, though curiosity flickered behind her eyes. She had learned not to push. People revealed themselves when they were ready. Days turned into weeks. Daniel arranged for Amina to attend regular prenatal checkups at a private clinic, not the crowded public ward, where she had once been dismissed with judgmental glances. The doctor spoke kindly, explained things patiently, reassured her about the baby's strength. "You're doing well," the doctor said during one visit, "but you must avoid stress." Amina almost laughed. Stress had followed her like a shadow for months. But here, in this quiet space, with someone finally taking her health seriously, the word felt less mocking. One evening, after a long day, Amina sat alone outside the cooperative, watching children play in the fading light. Their laughter was carefree, untouched by responsibility. She wondered what kind of world her child would be born into. Daniel joined her, handing her a cup of warm tea. "You think too much," he said gently. She smiled faintly. "I don't know how to stop." "Tell me," he said. "Sometimes it helps." Amina hesitated. Then, for the first time, she spoke without guarding every word. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "Not of being poor. I've survived that. I'm afraid of choosing wrong again." Daniel listened without interrupting. "I trusted someone once," she continued. "I believed patience could fix everything. I thought love meant enduring pain." She swallowed hard. "I don't want my child to grow up thinking that suffering is normal." Daniel's voice was calm when he replied, "Suffering exists, but it should never be romanticized." She looked at him, then really looked at him. There was depth in his eyes, something steady, something anchored. "Why are you like this?" she asked suddenly. "Why do you help without asking for control?" Daniel leaned back against the bench, exhaling slowly. "Because I know what it's like to be surrounded by people," he said, "and still feel unseen." The answer surprised her. That night, Amina cried quietly, not from pain, but from relief. As weeks passed, something unfamiliar began to grow between them. It wasn't romance, not yet. It was something slower, more careful. Trust. Daniel never touched her without permission, never commented on her body, never spoke over her. When she disagreed with him, he listened instead of correcting her. One day, he offered her work, not charity, but responsibility. "There's an administrative position opening at one of my offices," he said. "Part-time. Light duties. If you want it." Amina stiffened. "I don't have qualifications." "You have discipline," he replied, "and honesty. That matters." She thought of Kola's voice mocking her usefulness. "You just sit there." The memory burned, but this time it fueled her. "I'll try," she said. The office was modest, staffed mostly by women. Amina handled files, answered phones, kept records. She worked carefully, afraid of making mistakes, but determined to prove her worth. Daniel visited the office once briefly. He greeted everyone politely, avoided drawing attention to their connection. When he left, one of the supervisors whispered, "That man owns half this building." Amina froze. "What?" The woman laughed lightly. "You didn't know Daniel Okoye. Major investor, big name." The room seemed to tilt. That evening, Amina confronted him. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice steady but her heart racing. Daniel did not deny it. "I didn't lie," he said. "I just didn't lead with it." "You're rich," she said flatly. He nodded. "Yes." Her mind raced with memories. Power imbalance, dependency, expectations. "Why hide it?" she asked. "Because people behave differently," when they know, Daniel replied. "And I wanted you to choose freely." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Amina spoke. "I don't want to be saved," she said. "I want to stand." Daniel met her gaze. "Then stand. I'll walk beside you if you allow it." That was the moment something shifted. Not love. Not yet. But possibility. Far away, Kola sat with friends, complaining about women who used men to escape poverty. He laughed loudly, convinced he had moved on. He had no idea that the woman he discarded was now walking into rooms he could never enter, and he had no idea that soon, very soon, her path would cross his again. Amina learned slowly that safety could exist without fear. The days at the office gave her structure. She woke early, prepared carefully, and walked to work with measured steps, one hand often resting protectively on her belly. The city still moved fast around her, indifferent and loud, but inside her, something had shifted. She was no longer drifting. She had direction. Her supervisors noticed her diligence. Files were organized. Calls were answered with calm courtesy. When mistakes happened, she corrected them quietly, without excuses. People began to rely on her, and Daniel remained exactly the same. He did not remind her of favors. He did not monitor her progress or hover over her work. He did not use his position to command gratitude. When they spoke, it was as equals, sometimes about work, sometimes about nothing important at all. That consistency confused her more than generosity ever could. One afternoon, as rain clouds gathered and the office emptied early, Daniel offered to walk her back to the cooperative. The streets were slick, the air heavy with the promise of another downpour. "Do you ever regret helping me?" Amina asked suddenly. Daniel glanced at her surprised. "Why would I?" "Because I'm complicated," she said softly. "I come with history, with scars." Daniel stopped walking and faced her fully. "Everyone does," he said. "Some people just hide them better." She nodded, absorbing the weight of that truth. At the cooperative, the women noticed the change in her. Amina spoke more, laughed occasionally. She began mentoring a younger woman who had just arrived, frightened and unsure, much like she once had been. "You'll be okay," Amina told her gently. "Not today, but one day." Those words were no longer empty encouragements. They were lived experience. At night, Amina wrote letters. She never planned to send letters to her unborn child, to the woman she used to be, to the future she hoped to build. Writing helped her make sense of the journey to stitch together pieces that pain had torn apart. One evening, as she sat alone under the dim bulb in her room, the baby kicked sharply. Amina gasped, then smiled through tears. "I promise," she whispered. "I'll choose better for us." Daniel noticed changes too. He noticed how Amina no longer flinched when someone raised their voice, how she met his gaze without lowering her eyes, how she spoke with quiet certainty about her boundaries. He admired that strength, not as a rescuer, but as a witness. Yet there were moments when he struggled. He wanted to do more, to shield her from every hardship, to erase the cruelty of her past with comfort and security. But he understood that taking too much control would undo everything she was building. So he held back. It wasn't easy. One afternoon, Daniel received a call from his assistant, urgency sharp in her tone. "Sir, there's been talk," she said. "People are noticing your involvement with the woman from the cooperative." The board. I know, Daniel interrupted calmly. "Let them talk." "But your image." "My image is not my conscience," he replied. End of discussion. That evening, he arrived at the cooperative later than usual. Amina sensed something was different. "You're quiet," she observed. Daniel smiled faintly. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how much effort people put into appearances," he said, "and how little into truth." Amina considered this. "Truth is inconvenient," she said. "It forces people to see themselves." Daniel looked at her with something like awe. "You've learned a lot." She smiled. "Pain is a teacher." As her pregnancy progressed, the doctor recommended reduced hours. Amina resisted at first, unwilling to lose momentum. "I can handle it," she insisted. Daniel listened, then suggested a compromise: shorter shifts, flexible hours, no pressure. "For the baby," he said. "Not for me." Reluctantly, she agreed. The slower pace gave her time to think, to reflect. She thought about Kola, less with anger. Now, more with clarity. She saw their marriage without romantic filters. She recognized the imbalance, the emotional labor she had carried alone, the warning signs she had ignored. "I won't repeat that pattern," she told herself firmly. One weekend, Daniel invited her to attend a small community event, not as his guest, but as part of the cooperative's outreach. There were speeches, modest donations, children running between chairs. Amina watched Daniel interact with people, respectful, attentive, never dismissive. He listened to elders. He knelt to speak to children at eye level. This was not performance. This was character. Later that evening, as they stood watching the sunset, Amina spoke again. "I used to think power was loud," she said. "Aggressive, dominant." Daniel nodded. "That's how it's often displayed. But real power," she continued, "is restraint. It's choosing not to crush someone when you could." Daniel smiled softly. "You're right." The moment lingered, not romantic, but intimate in its honesty. That night, Amina dreamed not of fear or loss, but of walking forward, her child beside her unafraid. Meanwhile, across the city, Kola's life continued in shallow comfort. He drank. He complained. He told stories that painted himself as the victim. "She thought she was better than me," he told a friend. Women forget their place once they start listening to outsiders. The friend nodded, uninterested. Kola did not know that Amina was no longer listening to voices like his. Weeks passed. One afternoon, Amina received a message from an unfamiliar number. Her heart skipped. "I heard you're doing well," the message read. Funny how life works. She stared at the screen. She didn't reply. She deleted the message and placed the phone face down, her hand resting protectively on her belly. The past had no authority here. Not anymore. Daniel noticed her silence later that day. "Everything okay?" he asked. Amina met his eyes. "Yes," she said firmly. Everything is finally okay. He believed her, and as the city prepared unknowingly for the collision of truths yet to come, Amina stood rooted in something she had never truly known before. Stability, not because someone rescued her, but because someone respected her enough to let her become whole on her own. There are moments when love does not announce itself. It arrives quietly through consistency, through patience, through the absence of fear. For Amina, that realization came slowly. She noticed it in the way her shoulders no longer tensed when Daniel entered a room, in how her breathing remained steady during disagreements, in how silence between them felt warm instead of threatening. This was new territory. In her marriage to Kola, silence had always been dangerous. It meant anger, waiting to explode. It meant punishment disguised as quiet. She had learned to fill every pause with explanations, apologies, promises to do better. But with Daniel, silence meant understanding. Some afternoons, they sat under the neem tree without speaking, watching the women at the cooperative move about their tasks. Other times, they talked about memories, childhood streets, favorite foods, small failures that shaped them. Daniel never rushed her stories. When she paused, he waited. That alone healed parts of her she didn't know were wounded. As her pregnancy advanced, the baby's movements grew stronger, more insistent. Amina often smiled at unexpected kicks during conversations. "He's stubborn," Daniel remarked once. She laughed softly. "Or determined. Then he gets that from you." The comment lingered in the air. A compliment, but more than that, an acknowledgement of her strength. One evening, as the sky darkened and the cooperative quieted, Amina felt a sudden wave of fear. It came without warning, crashing into her chest. "What if this disappears?" she blurted. Daniel looked up from his cup of tea. "What?" "This," she said, gesturing vaguely. "This peace, this safety." He set the cup down. Nothing in life is guaranteed. The honesty startled her, but he continued. "Some things are built to last because they're built slowly." She nodded, absorbing his words. That night, Amina dreamed of her wedding to Kola. Not the end, but the beginning. She saw herself smiling, hopeful, unaware of what lay ahead. When she woke, tears dampened her pillow. The difference now was that the tears did not break her. She spoke to Daniel about the dream the next day. "I feel foolish," she admitted, "for believing." Daniel shook his head. "Belief isn't foolish. Trusting someone who doesn't deserve it is painful, but it doesn't make you weak." She exhaled, relieved. As days passed, the cooperative prepared for a small celebration, a fundraiser for displaced mothers. There would be speeches, music, modest food. Daniel insisted Amina take a leading role in organizing it. "You know their stories," he said. "You speak their language." She hesitated. "I'm not a speaker." "You're a survivor," he replied. "That's more powerful." On the day of the event, Amina stood before a small crowd, her hands trembling slightly. She spoke simply about resilience, about dignity, about the need to see pregnant women not as burdens, but as human beings worthy of care. Her voice steadied as she continued. "When people look away," she said, "it doesn't mean we disappear. It means we must learn to see ourselves." The applause surprised her. Later, as she stepped down, Daniel watched her with quiet pride. "You were incredible," he said. Amina smiled shyly. "I was terrified." "Courage isn't the absence of fear," Daniel replied. "It's moving forward anyway." That evening, something shifted. As they walked together under the fading light, Amina felt an unfamiliar warmth. Not urgency, not desire, but connection. She realized she trusted him, not because he had proven his power, but because he had never used it against her. She stopped walking. Daniel, she said softly, I need to say something. He turned to her attentive. I'm not ready to be anyone's partner. She continued carefully. Not emotionally. Not yet. He nodded without hesitation. I understand. But she added, meeting his eyes, I don't want distance either. A gentle smile crossed his face. Then we stay exactly where we are. Relief flooded her. No pressure. No conditions. Just presence. That night, Amina sat alone, writing another letter, this one different from the rest. I am not broken, she wrote. I am healing. Meanwhile, across the city, Kola's curiosity had begun to itch. He had heard rumors, vague mentions of Amina working somewhere, of her being helped by a man. At first, he dismissed them as gossip, but something about the tone unsettled him. How does a woman like her suddenly find stability? He muttered one evening. Pride twisted into suspicion. He began asking questions. Most people shrugged. Some avoided him. One acquaintance mentioned a name Daniel, but nothing more. Kola scoffed. Another man playing savior. But the thought lingered. Back at the cooperative, Amina prepared for maternity leave. Her doctor insisted she slow down further. Though she resisted, she eventually accepted help, this time without guilt. Daniel ensured everything was arranged discreetly. No fanfare, no announcement. One afternoon, he asked her a question that startled her. What do you want after the baby arrives? He asked. Amina considered this. I want to continue working, she said. I want independence. I want my child to see me stand. Daniel nodded. Then that's what we'll plan for. Though we didn't feel presumptuous, it felt supportive. As the weeks passed, Amina's fear of the future softened into cautious hope. She began to imagine her child's first steps, first words, first understanding of love, not as endurance, but as respect. One evening, as rain began to fall softly, Daniel walked her back to her room. You're stronger than you know, he said. Amina smiled. I'm learning. She paused at the door. Thank you, she added, not out of obligation, but sincerity. Daniel met her gaze. For trusting me. As he walked away, Amina closed the door and leaned against it, heart steady, grounded. For the first time in a long while, silence wrapped around her like home. There are truths that change everything the moment they are spoken. Daniel had lived with many truths like that. Numbers, contracts, acquisitions, power. But none felt as delicate as the one he kept from Amina. Not because he was ashamed of it, but because he feared what it might steal. For weeks now, the weight of his identity had pressed quietly against his chest. Every time, Amina laughed freely. Every time she spoke without caution. Every time she chose trust over fear. He wondered whether all of it would vanish the moment she knew. He had seen it happen before. People's shoulders stiffening, their voices softening unnaturally, their choices bending around his wealth. He did not want that with her. Yet secrecy, he knew, was also a form of distance. The tension showed itself one afternoon when Daniel arrived at the office unexpectedly and found Amina surrounded by hushed voices. Two junior staff members stopped talking the moment they noticed him. Amina sensed it immediately. What's going on? She asked. One woman smiled awkwardly. Nothing. Just work. But later that evening, as they walked together, Amina spoke again. People act differently around you, she said. They always have. I just didn't want to see it. Daniel slowed his steps. Does that bother you? She considered the question carefully. It confuses me, she admitted. Because with me, you're normal. But with others, they see the version of me they want, he finished quietly. Amina stopped walking. Daniel, she said gently, I don't need all the details, but I need honesty. The words settled between them. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He sat alone in his apartment, high above the city, surrounded by space that suddenly felt meaningless. He thought about the board members who obeyed him without question, the journalists who chased his name, the strangers who bowed when he entered rooms. And then he thought of Amina, folding donated clothes with careful hands, humming softly to herself. The contrast felt unbearable. The next morning, Daniel made a decision. He invited Amina to lunch, not at a restaurant, but at a quiet outdoor cafe far from the city's attention. Somewhere neutral, somewhere human. They sat beneath an umbrella as traffic murmured in the distance. "There's something I need to tell you," Daniel said. Amina's heart tightened, but she nodded. "I'm listening." "I manage more than I've admitted," he continued. "The offices you work in, they're part of my company, not just investments." She remained still. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want power to enter this space," he said. "But I understand now that withholding truth can do the same." Amina inhaled slowly. "You're very wealthy," she said quietly. "Yes." The word hung heavy. Amina looked away, staring at her hands. "So this is why doors open," she murmured. "Why people step aside." Daniel said nothing. "Why help me at all?" she asked finally. "You could help anyone." He leaned forward. "Because when I found you, you didn't ask for rescue. You asked for dignity." Silence. Amina closed her eyes briefly, grounding herself. "I need time," she said at last. "Not to judge, but to understand what this means." Daniel nodded. "Take all the time you need." She did not pull away. She did not accuse. But something had shifted. That afternoon, Amina returned to the cooperative with a storm of thoughts. Wealth had once been a threat to her, a symbol of imbalanced control dependence. She feared being absorbed into someone else's shadow. That night, she wrote again. "Truth doesn't scare me," she wrote. "Losing myself does." Over the following days, Amina paid attention to herself, to Daniel, to the dynamics she had ignored before. She noticed how people deferred to him even when he spoke softly, how decisions bent in his direction. But she also noticed what didn't change. He still listened. He still asked permission. He still respected her boundaries. One evening, she confronted him again. "I don't want to be shaped by your world," she said. "I won't trade my voice for comfort." Daniel met her gaze steadily. "Then don't. I'm not looking for ownership. I'm looking for partnership, if you ever choose that." Her chest tightened. "And if I don't?" she asked. "Then I remain grateful," he replied, "for knowing you." That answer stayed with her. Meanwhile, whispers began spreading beyond the cooperative. People recognized Daniel's name more clearly now. Some women eyed Amina with curiosity, others with envy, a few with suspicion. "She's lucky," one whispered. "She planned this," another muttered. Amina felt the familiar sting of judgment, but this time she refused to shrink. "I didn't plan survival," she told herself. "I earned it." Across the city, Kola finally heard the name in full. Daniel Okoye. The realization hit him like a slap. "That Daniel?" he asked sharply. The businessman, the man he was speaking to, nodded. "The same." Kola laughed incredulously. "You're saying my ex-wife is with a billionaire?" The thought burned. Anger rose, not because Amina had found happiness, but because she had done so without him. Because she had escaped the story he told himself that she was nothing without him. His pride twisted into something ugly. Back at the cooperative, Amina made her choice. She approached Daniel one evening as he prepared to leave. "I don't want secrecy anymore," she said calmly, "but I also won't be displayed." Daniel nodded. "I'll follow your lead." And she added, "I want everything we build to be transparent, especially for my child." His voice softened. "Agreed." In that moment, Amina felt something solidify, not romance, not dependency, but alignment. She wasn't being pulled into his world. He was meeting her in hers. As the city slept unaware of the tensions forming beneath its surface, Amina placed a hand over her belly and whispered to her child. "You will know truth," she said, "and you will never be taught to fear it." Somewhere, Kola stared at his phone jealousy, curdling into obsession. And somewhere else, two lives, once broken, once guarded, were moving carefully toward a collision neither of them could fully control. Kola did not sleep that night. The name Daniel Okoye echoed in his head like a curse he couldn't silence. He lay on his back, staring at the cracked ceiling of the room he rented, replaying every rumor he had dismissed, every whisper he had laughed off. The truth, sharp and humiliating, had finally landed. Amina wasn't struggling. She wasn't begging. She wasn't paying for her mistakes the way he had told himself she would. She was standing beside a man whose name carried weight, whose presence bent rooms and opened doors. And the more Kola thought about it, the more the realization twisted inside him like a knife. How did she get there? The answer: he refused to accept that she had survived, grown, and chosen better, did not fit the story he needed. So he reached for another one. She used him. That narrative was easier to swallow. It protected his pride. It turned his abandonment into foresight, his cruelty into caution. By morning, Kola had decided he would confront her, not to reconcile, not to apologize, but to reclaim something controlled dignity, the illusion of superiority. If Amina had risen, it would not be without his voice reminding her of where she came from. He began asking questions more aggressively now. He visited old neighbors, pretended concern. "I just want to make sure she's safe," he said, lowering his voice. "She's still the mother of my child." Some people hesitated. Others, eager for gossip, pointed him in vague directions. The cooperative's name surfaced more than once. Kola smiled thinly. Across the city, Amina felt the air change before she knew why. It was subtle glances held a second too long, conversations quieting when she entered rooms. She recognized the pattern instantly. Shame had a smell. She had lived with it long enough to know when it returned. Daniel noticed too. "Something's off," he said one evening as they walked together. "People are watching." Amina nodded. "The past doesn't knock," she replied. "It arrives." She did not tell him about the messages she had received earlier that week, numbers she didn't recognize, words that pretended politeness but carried an edge. "We should talk. You owe me answers." She deleted them all, but the tension followed her. At her next prenatal appointment, Amina felt unwell tightness in her chest, a pounding headache. The doctor reassured her physically, but warned her again about stress. "You need calm," she said firmly. "Your body remembers what your mind tries to forget." That night, Amina sat alone and breathed through the fear. She placed both hands on her belly and grounded herself. "I choose peace," she whispered, "no matter who comes looking." The following afternoon, Kola found the cooperative. He stood across the street for several minutes, watching women move in and out, watching Amina through the open gate as she spoke with someone near the entrance. She looked different, stronger, steadier, visibly pregnant, but unbowed. His chest tightened. So this was what she had become without him. When he finally crossed the street, his steps were deliberate. He wanted to be seen. He wanted to be recognized. Amina noticed him immediately. Her body reacted. Before her mind did heart-racing, breath-shortening, but she did not retreat. She straightened, placed a hand on her belly, and met his eyes. "Kola," she said calmly. He smirked. "So this is where you ended up." "This is where I work," she replied. "What do you want?" His gaze flicked to her stomach. "My child." The words landed hard. Amina inhaled slowly. "You gave up that right when you sent me into the rain." He laughed softly. "You think a few months erase blood. This isn't a conversation, she said, voice steady. It's a boundary. Kola stepped closer. I heard you found a rich man. Congratulations. There it was, the bitterness he couldn't hide. I found dignity, Amina replied. Wealth has nothing to do with it. His eyes darkened. Don't lie to me. You always did that, pretended you were better. Amina felt Daniel's presence before she saw him. He had arrived quietly, stopping a few steps behind her, not intervening, yet watching her choose her own footing. This is not the place, Amina said firmly. Leave. Kola turned, noticing Daniel fully for the first time. He assessed him quickly, the calm posture, the tailored clothes, the way people subtly shifted to make space. So you're him, Kola said. Daniel Okoye. Daniel met his gaze without expression. I am. Kola laughed sharp and mocking. Figures. You like collecting broken things. Amina stiffened. But Daniel spoke before she could. She's not broken, he said quietly. And you will lower your voice. The authority in his tone cut through the air. Kola sneered. You think money gives you the right to silence me? No, Daniel replied. Respect does. And you're running out of it. A small crowd had gathered. Whispers rippled outward. Amina felt the weight of the moment. This was the collision she had sensed coming. Kola, she said, lifting her chin. This ends now. You will not come here again. You don't get to decide. That he snapped. That child is mine. Amina's voice did not waver. The law will decide, and so will my conscience. Daniel stepped forward, then not aggressively, but decisively. Any further contact, he said calmly, will go through legal channels. You are not welcome here. Kola's laughter faded. The reality of the situation began to sink in. Not just Daniel's wealth, but his reach. The people watching. The consequences. You think you've won, Kola said bitterly. But remember where you came from. Amina held his gaze. I do. That's why I'll never go back. He stood there for a moment longer, pride warring with humiliation. Then he turned and walked away, shoulders stiff, jaw clenched. As he disappeared down the street, the cooperative slowly returned to life. Conversations resumed. Work continued, but the tremor lingered. Daniel turned to Amina. Are you okay? She nodded, then shook her head. I will be, she said. Just not today. He placed a respectful distance between them. Do you want me to stay? Yes, she admitted. Not to fix anything. Just stay. They sat together under the neem tree, the sounds of the city soft around them. Far away, Kola replayed the scene again and again. The way people had looked at him. The way Amina had stood tall. The way Daniel had spoken not as a rival, but as a wall. Humiliation hardened into resolve. This isn't over, Kola told himself. Not yet. And as the city moved unknowingly toward a day that would shatter illusions and expose truths, Amina closed her eyes and breathed, choosing again. Not fear, but clarity. The morning of the wedding arrived without drama. No thunder. No sudden signs. Just a pale sunrise stretching slowly over the city, unaware that it was about to witness something unforgettable. Amina woke before dawn. She lay still for a moment, one hand resting on her belly, listening to the quiet rhythm of her child's movements. There was nervousness in her chest. Yes, but not fear. Not anymore. Today was not about perfection. It was about truth. The small apartment buzzed gently as the women moved in and out, adjusting fabrics, laying out accessories, whispering encouragement. The wedding was intentionally simple. No grand ballroom. No excessive display. Just a modest outdoor venue surrounded by trees, white fabric, and carefully arranged chairs. Amina had chosen simplicity on purpose. She refused to let her past turn this day into a performance. As she dressed, the seamstress paused, studying her reflection. "You're glowing," she said softly. Amina smiled faintly. "I'm breathing." That felt like enough. Across the city, Daniel stood alone in his room, fastening the cuff of his shirt. He did not feel the rush many men described on wedding days. Instead, there was a steady calm, a certainty that surprised him. He thought of Amina's strength, her boundaries, the way she had chosen him, not out of desperation, but clarity. That mattered. His assistant knocked lightly. "Everything is ready, sir." Daniel nodded. "Thank you." As he stepped outside, the city seemed to hold its breath. Guests began arriving slowly. Friends from the cooperative, a few business associates, elders Daniel respected, people who had seen fragments of Amina's journey without knowing its full weight. The atmosphere was warm, respectful, quietly joyful. Amina arrived moments later. The murmurs rippled through the crowd, not because of extravagance, but because of presence. She walked slowly, her posture straight, her expression composed. Her dress was white, flowing gently over her pregnant belly, not hiding it, not apologizing for it. This was who she was. Daniel met her halfway, their eyes locked. No rush, no nerves, just recognition. "You're ready," he said softly. "So are you," she replied. They took their places before the officiant hands closed, but not clinging. The ceremony began. Words of commitment filled the air, spoken clearly, deliberately. Promises of respect, of partnership, of protection that did not suffocate. Amina listened carefully to every word Daniel spoke. "I will not lead by force," he said. "I will walk beside you." Her chest tightened. When it was her turn, she did not speak loudly, but every syllable carried. "I choose you," she said, "not because I need saving, but because I want building." There were smiles, soft nods, quiet tears. Everything was unfolding exactly as it should, until it wasn't. A sudden movement at the edge of the venue drew attention. A man stood just beyond the rows of chairs, uninvited, tense eyes burning. Kola. For a split second, Amina's heart stuttered. But she did not step back. She did not turn away. Daniel noticed immediately. The officiant hesitated. Murmurs spread. Kola stepped forward. "This is a lie," he said loudly. "All of it." Gasps cut through the crowd. Amina's breath slowed, not because she was calm, but because she chose to be. "Kola," she said firmly, "this is not your place. You don't get married while carrying my child," he snapped. "You don't erase me like I never existed." Daniel stepped forward, but Amina lifted a hand. "Let me," she said quietly. She turned fully to Kola. "You erased yourself," she said, "the night you sent me away." Kola laughed bitterly. "And now you parade yourself in white. You think money makes this clean." The insult stung, but Amina didn't flinch. "This child," she said evenly, "will never learn that cruelty is love." That was when Kola lost control. He surged forward, grabbing the edge of Amina's dress. The tearing sound sliced through the air. Fabric ripped. Gasps turned into screams. Amina stumbled instinctively, clutching her belly as the crowd erupted into chaos. Pain flared, not just physical, but sharp and immediate fear for the life inside her. "Stop," someone shouted. Daniel moved instantly, placing himself between them, one arm extended protectively in front of Amina. "Touch her again," Daniel said coldly, "and you will leave in handcuffs." Security rushed in, restraining Kola as he struggled violently. "This is what you wanted," Kola screamed. "You wanted to humiliate me." Daniel did not raise his voice. "You humiliated yourself," he said, "and you will answer for it." Amina felt dizzy. The world blurred at the edges as adrenaline crashed through her system. Daniel turned to her, Immediately concern etched across his face. Amina, he said urgently, talk to me. I'm here, she whispered, just shaken. The officiant called for calm. Guests stood frozen, some furious, some stunned, all aware they had just witnessed something irreversible. As Kola was dragged away, his eyes locked on Amina one last time, not with love, not even regret, but with the realization that he had lost control forever. Daniel helped Amina sit. Do you want to stop? He asked gently. We can end this now. She met his eyes, breathing steadily. No, she said. We continue. There was a pause. Then slowly, the crowd settled. Amina stood again, holding the torn fabric together, not hiding it. This is part of my story, she said calmly, and I'm not ashamed of it. The officiant resumed. The vows were completed. The union sealed not in perfection, but in truth. As applause filled the space, it carried something deeper than celebration. It carried resolve. The wedding had not been quiet, but it had been real. For a few seconds after the tearing stopped, no one moved. The torn fabric lay in Amina's hands like a wound that refused to close. Her breathing was shallow, measured, as if she were afraid that one wrong inhale might undo everything she was holding together. Her body, her child, her resolve. The crowd stood frozen. This was no longer a wedding. It was a reckoning. Daniel stayed close, not touching her, unless she leaned toward him. His presence was a quiet shield, steady, unyielding. He watched her face, the color in her cheeks, the way her fingers trembled against the torn lace. You're safe, he said softly. I've got you. Amina nodded once. She didn't trust her voice yet. Security tightened their grip on Kola as he thrashed, shouting accusations that echoed across the venue. His words were messy now, no longer crafted for sympathy, but sharpened by humiliation. She's lying, he yelled. Ask her what she did to me. A murmur spread through the guests, some shocked, some angry, some finally seeing the truth for what it was. An elderly woman stepped forward from the first row. She had watched the ceremony quietly until now, her face lined with years and wisdom. Enough, she said, her voice firm. A man who protects his pride by harming a pregnant woman has no honor. Silence followed. Another voice joined in, then another. You chased her away. She begged for help. We heard the stories. Kola faltered, startled by the shift. He had expected fear, maybe pity. He had not expected witnesses. Daniel turned to the head of security. Call the police, he said calmly. This is assault. Kola laughed bitterly. You think the law cares about a woman like her? Daniel's eyes hardened. Today it will. As security escorted Kola toward the exit, Amina felt a wave of dizziness surge again, this time heavier, sharper. Her knees buckled slightly. Daniel caught her immediately. I need air, she whispered. They moved her to a quiet corner, away from the crowd. Someone brought water. Another offered a chair. The noise of the venue softened, replaced by worried whispers. Daniel crouched in front of her, meeting her eyes. Talk to me. Where does it hurt? My chest, she said honestly. And fear. I thought I was past this. He nodded, steadying her hands. Trauma doesn't disappear just because we heal. It remembers. Tears slid down her cheeks, not loud, not dramatic, but heavy with release. I didn't want him to take this from me, she said. Not again. He didn't, Daniel replied firmly. You're still standing. She closed her eyes and breathed. The officiant approached cautiously. Do you want to pause the ceremony? He asked gently. Amina opened her eyes. No, she said. I want to finish what I started. The resolve in her voice startled even herself. When she returned to the front, the crowd rose instinctively, not out of tradition, but respect. Faces that once held doubt now held solidarity. Some wiped tears, others nodded encouragement. Amina stood tall. "This dress is torn," she said calmly, addressing the guests. "But I am not." Her words landed with quiet power. "I spent too long believing that being patient meant being silent," she continued. "That love meant enduring pain. Today, I choose something different." Daniel stepped beside her, close enough to be felt, not overshadowing. "We choose each other," she finished. In truth, the officiant cleared his throat and continued. The vows, already spoken once, were repeated not because they needed to be, but because the moment demanded affirmation. When Daniel said, "I will protect your dignity," the words carried weight. When Amina said, "I will not disappear," the crowd exhaled as one. The ceremony ended not with music, but with applause that felt earned. Later, as guests gathered in small clusters, the police arrived quietly. Statements were taken. Witnesses spoke. The torn fabric became evidence, not shame. Daniel spoke briefly with officers, his tone respectful but firm. There was no spectacle, just process. Amina watched from a distance, her hand resting on her belly. "I'm proud of you," a woman from the cooperative said softly. "You didn't shrink." Amina smiled weakly. "I was terrified." "So was he," the woman replied, nodding toward the exit where Kola had been taken. "That's the difference." As evening settled, the venue emptied slowly. The celebration had changed shape, less festive, more meaningful. People lingered, reluctant to leave the gravity of what they had witnessed. Daniel approached Amina again. "The doctor is on standby," he said, "just in case." She nodded. "Let's go." The drive to the clinic was quiet. Streetlights blurred past the windows as Amina focused on her breathing. The baby shifted alive, responsive. Relief washed through her. At the clinic, examinations confirmed what she needed most to hear. "The baby is fine," the doctor said. "But you've been under severe stress. You need rest." Daniel exhaled slowly, tension easing from his shoulders. When they returned home, night had fully fallen. Amina sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the torn dress draped over a chair. "I should throw it away," she murmured. Daniel shook his head. "Only if you want to." She touched the fabric gently. "It reminds me that I survived." "Then keep it," he said. They sat together in silence, not the dangerous silence of the past, but the kind that holds space for healing. Across the city, Kola sat in a holding room, his anger finally cooling into something heavier. The crowd's faces replayed in his mind, the way they had looked at him, not with fear, but with clarity. For the first time he understood. He had not lost Amina to another man. He had lost her to the truth, and no amount of shouting could tear that away. Morning came slowly, as if the city itself needed time to recover. Amina woke with a dull ache behind her eyes and a familiar heaviness in her chest. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory returned, not as a wave, but as a series of still images. The tearing sound, the gasps, Daniel's arm in front of her, the cold certainty in his voice. She placed her hand on her belly. A gentle movement answered. Relief loosened the knot in her chest. Daniel was already awake, seated by the window, with a phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, controlled. "Yes," he said. "We'll cooperate fully." A pause. No statements to the press. Another pause. "Thank you." He ended the call and turned as Amina stirred. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Tired," she admitted, "but clear." He nodded. "The police want formal statements today. Only if you're ready." Amina sat up slowly. "I'm ready." That surprised even her. At the station, the air was cool and sterile. Amina sat across from an officer who spoke gently, professionally. Daniel remained nearby, not hovering, not interrupting, only present. "Tell us what happened," the officer said. Amina took a breath. She spoke without embellishment. About the night she was sent away in the rain. About the lies spread afterward. About the messages. About the confrontation. About the dress. Her voice did not shake. When she finished, the officer nodded. "Thank you. This will help." Daniel gave his statement next, precise, factual, unflinching. Witness accounts followed. The torn dress was logged as evidence. Photographs were taken. Everything moved forward with a steady inevitability. Kola, meanwhile, sat in a holding area, his confidence drained. He had slept little. His mind replayed the ceremony again and again. Not the act itself, but the moment the crowd turned, when silence stopped protecting him. A lawyer spoke quietly beside him. "There are multiple witnesses, assault charges, harassment." Kola scoffed weakly. "She provoked me." The lawyer looked unimpressed. "Provocation doesn't justify violence, especially against a pregnant woman." That word pregnant landed with a weight Kola could not shake. Later that afternoon, Amina returned home. The apartment felt different now, quieter, safer. She changed into comfortable clothes and sat on the couch, exhaustion settling deep into her bones. "I didn't think telling the truth would feel like this," she said softly. Daniel sat across from her. "Like what?" "Like relief," she replied, "and grief. Both." He nodded. "Truth does that. It closes one door and opens another." That evening, news spread not in headlines, but in conversations. People who had attended the wedding spoke. Rumors corrected themselves. Lies lost their shine. At the cooperative, women gathered around Amina when she visited briefly the next day. "You were brave," one said. "I was scared," Amina replied honestly. Bravery usually is another added, but not everyone was supportive. Whispers followed her. 2 questions about wealth motives, appearances. Amina heard them and kept walking. She had learned that not every voice deserved an answer. That night, she sat alone and wrote again. "The truth does not shout," she wrote. "It waits." Daniel, meanwhile, faced a different reckoning. Calls came from business associates, board members, distant relatives. "You should have handled it quietly. This kind of attention isn't good. Why involve yourself so deeply?" Daniel listened and then dismissed the calls one by one. For the first time in years, he felt no conflict between power and principle. At dinner, Amina noticed his silence. "They're pressuring you," she said. "Yes," he admitted. "But it's temporary." She hesitated. "I don't want to cost you anything." Daniel met her gaze. "You don't cost me. You clarify me." The words settled gently between them. Days passed. Kola was formally charged. Court dates were scheduled. The reality of consequences began to take shape, not dramatic, not cinematic, but heavy and unavoidable. In a quiet moment at the station, Kola asked to speak with Amina. Daniel was cautious. "You don't owe him anything." "I know," Amina replied, "but I want to hear what he has to say." They met in a monitored room, separated by a table. Kola looked smaller, somehow less certain, less loud. "I didn't mean to hurt you like that," he began. Amina studied his face carefully. "You did," she said calmly, "more than once." He swallowed. "I was angry. I felt replaced." "You were not replaced," Amina replied. "You left." Silence stretched. "I lost control," he muttered. "Yes," she agreed. "And I lost my fear." That seemed to sting more than accusation. "I'm not here to punish you," Amina continued. "The law will do what it does. I'm here to end this." Kola looked up. "End what?" "The power you think you still have over me," she said. You don't. She stood. As she turned to leave, Kola spoke again, quieter now. You think you're better than me. Amina paused at the door. No, she said. I think I'm free. Outside, Daniel waited. You okay? He asked. Yes, she said. I am now. As weeks passed, preparations resumed, not for another ceremony, but for life. Amina focused on her health, her work, her future as a mother. Daniel supported, not by directing, but by aligning. They discussed boundaries, parenting, transparency. This child will never be used as leverage, Amina said firmly. Agreed, Daniel replied. One evening, as they sat together, watching the city lights, Amina spoke softly. I used to think my story ended the night he sent me away. Daniel shook his head. That was the beginning. She smiled small real. Truth had found its voice. And for the first time, Amina wasn't afraid of what it would say next. The night the contractions began, Amina was not afraid. That surprised her. She had imagined panic sirens in her chest, memories crashing in the old reflex to endure alone. But when the pain tightened low and deep, she felt something steadier rise to meet it. Not courage, not denial, trust. She placed one hand on her belly, breathing through the wave. The room was quiet, the air cool. Daniel noticed her stillness before she spoke. It's starting, she said simply. He was at her side in seconds, calm but alert. How far apart? She closed her eyes, counted. Irregular, but stronger. He nodded, already reaching for his phone. Not to command, only to prepare. The doctor answered on the first ring. We'll come in, Daniel said. Now. As the car moved through the sleeping city, streetlights passing like slow pulses, Amina focused on her breath. The pain intensified, then eased, intensified again. Each wave reminded her of something else. Every time she had been told to be quiet, to wait, to endure without complaint. Not tonight. Daniel did not fill the silence with instructions or reassurances that rang hollow. He spoke when it mattered. You're not alone, he said. And you don't have to be strong right now. She exhaled. I don't want to be. That's okay, he replied. At the clinic, the staff moved efficiently. Amina was examined, monitored, reassured. The baby's heartbeat filled the room, steady, present. You've been under severe stress, the doctor said gently. We'll proceed carefully. Hours stretched. Pain climbed and receded. Time lost its edges. Between contractions, Amina drifted into memory. Not the sharp ones, the quiet ones. Nights at the cooperative. The sound of fabric folding. Daniel listening without interrupting. The moment she said no, and was believed. She squeezed his hand during a particularly strong wave. He held firm, not tight enough to control, not loose enough to vanish. I'm here, he said again, and she believed him. When the baby finally arrived, the room filled with a sound Amina had waited a lifetime to hear. A cry. Strong, indignant, alive. Tears blurred her vision. He's okay, she asked, voice cracking. He's perfect, the doctor replied. Daniel's shoulders sagged with relief. He didn't try to hide. He stood close as the baby was placed on Amina's chest. Small fingers curled instinctively, grasping skin anchoring. Amina laughed through tears. Hello, she whispered. I'm here. The exhaustion that followed was deep and heavy, but peaceful. The kind that comes after something real is completed. In the days that followed, Amina learned a new rhythm. Feeding, resting, healing. The quiet miracle of watching her child sleep, chest rising and falling, trusting the world to hold him. Daniel adjusted without fuss. He took calls outside the room. He asked nurses questions and listened to answers. He learned the art of rocking not to soothe himself, but to support. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled through the window, Amina watched him cradle their son with careful confidence. "You're good at this," she said. He smiled faintly. "I'm learning. So am I." News traveled again, but differently this time. Less spectacle, more substance. The incident at the wedding faded into context as people spoke of the baby of recovery, of boundaries respected. At the cooperative, women sent messages, small notes of joy, prayers, encouragement. Amina read them slowly, savoring the sense of belonging that no longer came at a price. Kola heard the news too. In the holding facility, the information arrived stripped of drama. The baby is born, healthy. He sat with it longer than he expected. For the first time, the reality of his actions settled without the armor of anger. He imagined the cry he hadn't heard the moment he hadn't protected. The weight pressed inward. He asked to see the child. The request was denied. Back at home, Amina recovered with intention. She allowed herself rest without guilt. She allowed Daniel's help without surrender. They spoke openly about schedules, boundaries, the future. "This child will know truth," Amina said one evening. "Not versions, not excuses." Daniel nodded. "And safety without conditions." She studied his face. "You don't have to prove anything to me." "I know," he said. "I just want to be worthy." That night, as the baby slept between them, Amina felt a familiar fear try to return. The old whisper, "This can still be taken." She acknowledged it and let it pass. Weeks later, a hearing date arrived. Amina prepared quietly. She did not rehearse speeches. She reviewed facts. She trusted the truth to stand without embellishment. In the courtroom, she spoke again, clear, measured, unafraid. Witnesses corroborated. Evidence aligned. The torn dress was displayed not as spectacle, but as context. Kola watched from his seat, the distance between them, finally undeniable. When the proceedings ended, there was no triumph in Amina's chest, only closure. Outside, Daniel waited. "It's done," she said. He nodded. "You did well." "I did what was necessary," she replied. They returned home to the simple life they were building. Feedings and naps, small laughs, honest conversations. One afternoon, Daniel brought a folded garment from the closet. "The dress," he said. "Do you still want to keep it?" Amina touched the fabric, then shook her head. "I don't need it anymore," she said. "I remember without it." They donated it to a textile project where it would be transformed, not erased. That evening, Amina held her son and spoke softly. "You will grow up knowing this," she said. "Love is not loud. Power does not bruise. And protection never asks you to disappear." Daniel listened from the doorway, something steady anchoring in his chest. Amina was no longer bracing for impact. She was standing, supported, respected whole. And in the quiet of that ordinary evening, with a child breathing softly against her heart, she knew the truth she had earned would carry her forward. Justice did not arrive with applause. It came quietly through procedures and paperwork, through hearings that stretched longer than patience, through questions asked and answered without drama. It came without revenge, and that was the hardest part for those who expected spectacle. For Amina, justice was not a moment. It was a process. She learned that in the weeks following the hearing, as dates were set and reset, as documents passed from one desk to another, each step demanded energy she didn't always have, especially with a newborn whose needs did not pause for adult affairs. Daniel offered help where it mattered: transport, childcare arrangements, space to rest, but he never pushed her to pursue more than she wanted. "Tell me what you need," he said, "not what you think you should need." She appreciated that distinction. At court, the facts stood without decoration. Witnesses spoke. Medical reports were read. The torn dress, now transformed into a neutral exhibit, was referenced not for its symbolism, but for its reality. Amina listened to her own story, told back to her in measured language. It felt strange hearing pain translated into legal terms: assault, harassment, threatening behavior, accurate but incomplete. Still, it was enough. Kola's defense leaned on familiar tropes: provocation, misunderstanding, emotion. Each one fell apart under scrutiny. The timeline did not bend. The witnesses did not contradict each other. When the decision was read, it did not feel like victory. It felt like an ending. Kola was found guilty of assault and harassment. Sentencing followed the guidelines: no special treatment, no theatrical punishment. Restrictions were imposed. Consequences formalized. As the room emptied, Amina remained seated for a moment longer than necessary. She watched the bench clear the papers, gathered the doors open and close. Daniel waited without rushing her. "Are you okay?" he asked softly when she finally stood. "I am," she said after a breath. "I just needed to see it finish." Outside, reporters hovered at a distance. Daniel guided Amina past them without comment. No statements, no sound bites. They returned home to a quiet apartment where the baby slept, unaware of the adult world's conclusions. That night, Amina sat with her son and felt something unexpected rise. Not anger, not triumph, but grief. Not for Kola, for the version of herself that had believed love meant erasure. Daniel noticed her stillness. "You don't have to carry this alone," he said. "I know," she replied. "I just want to feel it once so it doesn't come back." She allowed the tears to come. They were brief, honest, and cleansing. The next morning, Amina made a choice that surprised everyone, including Daniel. She asked to meet Kola one final time. Daniel was cautious. "You don't owe him closure." "I know," she said. "This isn't for him." They met in a supervised room, daylight filtering through a high window. Kola looked older than she remembered, less defined by anger, more by fatigue. He did not speak at first. Amina did. "I didn't come to forgive you," she said calmly. "I came to release myself." Kola frowned. "From what?" "From carrying your choices," she replied. "They belong to you." He swallowed. "I ruined everything." "You ruined what you touched," Amina said. "Not what I built after." Silence followed, heavy, reflective. "I won't visit again," she continued. "And I won't accept messages." "This ends here." Kola nodded slowly, the weight finally unavoidable. As Amina stood to leave, he spoke quieter than she had ever heard him. "I don't know how to live with this." Amina paused at the door. "You'll learn," she said, "the way I did." Outside, Daniel waited. "It's done," she said again, this time with finality. He nodded, offering his arm without assumption. She took it. Life resumed not as it was, but as it could be. Amina returned to the cooperative in a new role, not as someone seeking shelter, but as someone shaping policy. She helped organize resources for women facing domestic abuse, worked with counselors, coordinated legal referrals. She spoke when invited. She declined when not. Her voice was steady, never sensational. Daniel supported these efforts, quietly funding when asked, stepping back when not. He refused to brand the work with his name. "This isn't about recognition," he said. "It's about reach." At home, routines settled. Night feedings, early walks, conversations about boundaries and budgets and the ordinary choices that made up a life. One evening, as they watched the baby sleep, Amina spoke. "I don't want our story used to shame others," she said, "or to glorify suffering." "Agreed," Daniel replied. "We tell it for clarity, not drama." She smiled. "I used to think happiness was loud." "And now," he asked, "now I know it's consistent." she said. There were setbacks, of course. Old fears resurfaced on quiet nights. Public curiosity flared and faded. But the foundation held. Months later, Amina stood before a small gathering at the cooperative, no cameras, no speeches rehearsed. I'm not here to tell you. It gets easy, she said. I'm here to tell you. It gets honest. The women listened not because she was married to a powerful man, but because she spoke from ground they recognized. Afterward, Daniel waited near the door. You were clear, he said. So were you, she replied, glancing at the back row where he had stayed unobtrusive. As they walked home together, the city hummed around them, ordinary, alive, unconcerned with endings. Amina felt a calm she no longer questioned. Justice had come without applause, and that was enough. Happiness did not arrive all at once. It came in small, reliable moments, in the quiet of early mornings, when Amina fed her son while the city still slept. In the steady warmth of Daniel's presence, not hovering, not directing, just there. In the gentle predictability of routines that once felt impossible. This was the life she had chosen. Months passed, and the apartment filled with the soft evidence of living tiny clothes folded carefully, notes on the fridge, a plant by the window that refused to die despite her inexperience. The baby grew quickly alert and curious, responding to voices with bright attention. Amina watched him closely, not with fear, but with intention. She wanted him to learn safety without silence, strength without cruelty, love without endurance as proof. Daniel respected her instincts. They talked often about parenting, about money, about boundaries that would never be crossed. He listened more than he spoke. When they disagreed, they paused instead of pushing. I don't want power to enter this home, Amina said once. It won't, Daniel replied. Not without your consent. That promise mattered. They did not rush to redefine their relationship for the outside world. There were no grand announcements, no public displays meant to close old chapters with spectacle. Their commitment lived in practice, not performance. At the cooperative, Amina's role expanded naturally. She became a point of reference not because of her story, but because of her consistency. She helped women navigate systems designed to exhaust them. She listened without fixing. She shared resources without shame. When asked to speak publicly, she chose her words carefully. I'm not here to inspire you, she said at one gathering. I'm here to stand with you. The distinction landed. Daniel funded programs, quietly refusing plaques or naming rights. When pressed, he redirected attention to the women doing the work. This is not charity, he said simply. It's responsibility. Amina noticed how people reacted to him, not with fear, but respect, and how he redirected that energy toward others. She trusted him, not because he was powerful, but because he refused to wield power unnecessarily. At home, laughter returned in unexpected ways. Amina laughed at herself when she burned food. Daniel laughed when the baby grabbed his finger with surprising force. They learned to rest not as collapse, but as choice. One evening, as rain fell softly outside, Amina sat with Daniel and spoke the thought that had been forming quietly. I don't want my past erased, she said. I want it integrated. Daniel nodded. It made you who you are. Yes, she replied, but it doesn't get to define what comes next. They agreed on that fully. News of Kola faded into background noise. Legal restrictions held. Distance became permanent. Amina did not monitor his life. She no longer needed to. She had learned that freedom was not the absence of threat, but the presence of self. On a clear afternoon, Amina took her son to the cooperative. Women gathered around smiling, offering blessings. The child responded with wide eyes and soft sounds, absorbing warmth without confusion. This place kept me alive, Amina said quietly to Daniel. It kept you becoming, he replied. That felt accurate. As the year turned, they planned a small gathering. Not a wedding, not a renewal, just a moment to mark continuity. No speeches, no drama. Food shared among people who had witnessed growth rather than spectacle. Amina wore a simple dress. Daniel stood beside her. Their son slept nearby safe. There was no tearing fabric this time, only intactness. Later that night, after everyone had gone, Amina stood by the window and reflected not with regret, but clarity. She thought of the woman. She had been the patience that had masked fear, the silence mistaken for virtue. She did not judge that woman. She thanked her for surviving. Daniel joined her, wrapping a light blanket around her shoulders. You okay? He asked. Yes, she said. I'm complete. The word surprised her with its accuracy. In the months that followed, life continued ordinary and demanding, tender and strong. There were challenges. There were disagreements. There were nights when fear tried to return, but fear no longer led. Amina had learned the difference between endurance and dignity, between rescue and respect, between love that consumes and love that stands beside. And that knowledge shaped everything. One afternoon, she wrote one final letter, not to the past, but to the future. To anyone who thinks survival is the same as living, she wrote, know this, you are allowed to choose better without apology. She folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, not to be revisited, but to exist. As evening fell, Daniel sat with their son, reading softly. Amina watched from across the room, heart steady, breath even. This was not a fairy tale. It was better. It was earned. Sometimes, life does not break us in one loud moment. It breaks us quietly through silence, through endurance mistaken for love, through staying where we should have been protected. Amina's story reminds us that kindness is not weakness, and patience should never cost your dignity. True love does not ask you to disappear. It does not thrive on fear, control, or suffering. It stands beside you. It listens. It protects without owning. Karma does not always arrive as revenge. Sometimes it arrives as clarity, as growth, as the quiet realization that you survived what was meant to destroy you and chose better. If this story touched something inside you, take a moment to reflect. Have you ever stayed somewhere out of loyalty while losing yourself in the process? What would choosing yourself look like today? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might be the one someone else needs to hear. And if you believe stories like this, stories of truth healing, and second chances deserve a voice, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. More powerful journeys are coming.